gift of mercy is the special ability to recognize, empathize, and answer the immediate needs of others. There's a lot in that. I'm going to say that again. The gift of mercy is the special, I'm going to add, God-given ability through His grace to recognize, empathize, and answer the immediate needs of others. I want us to look at today an example of mercy demonstrated by the Master Himself. Matthew chapter 20, verses 29 to 34. Says the following. As Jesus and His disciples were leaving Jericho, a large crowd followed Him. 2 blind men were sitting by the roadside, and when they heard that Jesus was going by, they shouted, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." And the crowd rebuked them and told them to be quiet. But they shouted all the louder, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." Jesus stopped and He called to them. "What do you want me to do for you?" He asked. "Lord," they answered, "we want our sight." Jesus had compassion on them. Jesus showed mercy to them and touched their eyes, and immediately they received their sight and followed Him. Father, I pray right now, Lord, that You would help us to understand this concept, this gift of mercy, Lord. Father, for those that are gifted with this gift of grace, Lord, that they would recognize it, understand it, and move in it today, Lord. And that may we all have a heart to be compassionate to those that are in need. Thank You, Jesus. Let's first start by identifying from this passage a real hard truth. We see a couple of parties in here. We see the 2 blind men, we see the crowd, and we see Jesus. All right, I want to identify the first hard. Let's just deal with the elephant in the room first. When we look to, we see the blind men, we see what their needs, but let's look at the crowd for a second. Because there's a real hard truth, and the first truth that I want us to know is that the crowd is usually an unreliable source of mercy. Can I say that again? Because if you've got your expectations on the fact that the crowd is going to be merciful and they're going to go in on your need, I'm not saying that a crowd cannot lend its mercy to you. The crowd is usually an unreliable source of mercy, which is why the gift of mercy is so important. Because if you have the gift of mercy, somebody is counting on you to be merciful because the crowd is unreliable. What did the crowd do in this case? The 2 blind men are coming up and they're like, "Yo, Jesus!" What did the crowd do? They rebuked them. They're like, "Shut up! Stop bothering Jesus. Stop giving Him your nonsense. Jesus doesn't have time for you." These 2 blind men, they had a real need, and they're coming to the one that they heard could solve their need, and the people around were getting in the way of them getting their need met. The crowd was not, they were not their friends here. The crowd was the stumbling block for Jesus' mercy to flow to them. Because again, guys, this is a hard truth. The crowd is usually an unreliable source of mercy. It's not that Jesus was being bothered by their cry out of the blind men. Who was bothered? It was the crowd. Jesus wasn't like, "I don't have time for you." The crowd was like, "Hey, Jesus doesn't have time for you." Think about that for a second. And if the shoe fits, wear it. Have you ever been so caught up in your own situation and whatever Jesus could do for you that you did not allow for the mercy of God to flow into somebody else? Be like, "Oh, because I didn't invite them to church even though God told you to invite somebody to church"? I don't know if that made sense. Like, have you ever stood in the way from somebody else receiving their miracle because you thought, "Oh man, you know what? Pastor JJ is kind of weird sometimes. They might not like his style. I'm not going to invite him to church." Or I heard last week, and it wasn't planned, that I was out of town last weekend and the AC went off at church. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't planned. I promise you guys. It wasn't planned. But the AC goes out. Oh man, the AC went out. What if it goes out again next week? Let me not invite somebody because they might be too hot. As if Jesus can't flow in South Florida heat anyway. Are you hearing me? Like oftentimes we get in the way of others. Jesus is not bothered, but we're bothered when people have a need that needs to be met. I really think, as I was praying and meditating on this, I really think that the crowd were bothered that they stopped the blind man from coming forward because they were concerned about what they were trying to get from Jesus. And they were like, yo, you are interrupting what we're trying to get. Like, we had a good thing going, us, the crowd, and Jesus. Let's not invite somebody else who has an actual need, because then Jesus is going to have to stop and talk to that person when we had a good thing going. I think they were so caught up in what they were getting that it bothered them that these people were coming up and asking for healing. Can I just say, we can never get so caught up in what God is doing for our life and in our life that we don't demonstrate mercy to somebody else who is going through something. Because it might be tomorrow you're the person who needs mercy. The crowd will almost never respond to the overlooked, the forgotten, the exploited, the elderly, the sick, or the misunderstood. Most of them will look the other way. How can you say that, Pastor? Because I know a lot of people. And I've seen many people in times of need. And most people will look away. Are you guys hearing me? Most people will. That's why it's a standard for us to have compassion when people are in need. But if there's a real truth that we can agree upon, most people will not respond to that need accordingly. Which is why God said that there is a gift of mercy. There are people that know how to recognize, empathize, and rightly assess to meet the needs of special people. Are you hearing me? And if that's you, you have to flow in your gift, because the rest of us are messing this sucker up. Are you hearing me? Like, you've got to flow in that. You got to do you. Because the rest of us need to up our game. There's a special ability. That's why it's a gift of grace. Not everybody can do it the way that person can do it. You know, they were, not only were they bothered, I also think, okay, maybe they weren't bothered. Maybe they just didn't even know how to respond to the need. Have you ever been in a situation where you've seen somebody in a need and you're like, well, I'd like to help, but I don't really know what to do? I'll give you a practical example. Has anybody ever seen a homeless person staying by the side of the road? And you're like, hey, I'd like to help, but I don't know what to do. I don't even know how to relate to that person. Like, I don't even know what to say. I don't know what to do. Has anybody ever been there? Right? And maybe it's not a homeless person. Maybe it's somebody, with who's intellectually challenged or with an intellectual disability. Right? I would love to help this person, but I don't know how to help them. I was watching a great movie, and I'll recommend it. I'm sorry, I got a lot of movies today, but I think movies are the modern parables because we can all relate. A movie called Champions is with Woody Harrelson. PG-13, 95% of it is family friendly. The other 5%, at your own risk, okay? But, I'm saying, I got to be careful what I sponsor from the pulpit, you know what I'm saying? Just being clear. But the movie's called Champions, and it's about a basketball coach. Has anybody seen the movie? I think you saw it? Good movie? Thumbs up? Because if you give me a thumbs down, I'm going to stop preaching on it right now. All right, thumbs up, cool. All right, it's a really good movie. It's about an NBA caliber basketball coach who finds himself in a place where he's not where he needs to be, gets into, and spoiler alert, sorry guys, just watch it later, whatever. He finds himself in a place where he's not supposed to be, and he gets into a little bit of trouble with the court system, and he gets sentenced to volunteer hours, okay? And the volunteer hours he gets sentenced to is to basically be a coach for a local team of persons with intellectual disabilities. Okay? And so he's got to coach them. Here's this guy who's like, part of his trouble was like, we got to win, and you didn't listen to me. And now he's coaching persons with intellectual disabilities and special needs. He didn't want to do it, but he had to do it. And part of his issue was he didn't know how to relate to them. He had no idea how to meet their needs. And I think part of the problem that sometimes we have is that we would like to help, but we don't know how to meet the person's needs. How do we help them in their time of trouble? The person who is gifted with mercy, and if this is you, understand this, you're so necessary because you will identify the need. You will see what's going on, and you'll be able to meet it where others can't. It will come naturally for you. It's not that anybody else is lesser in the situation. It's just God gifted you with the ability to see the need, to meet that need, to relate with that person, to have a grace, to be able to bridge that gap. Am I making myself clear? Like, that's what these giftings are for. If we go back to the first gifting of prophecy, it is, if you have the gifting of prophecy, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. What God is saying is people need to hear my message, and there are certain people that if they don't take the gifting that they have and speak what God has given them, then people will not hear the message that God intended for them to get, and they'll miss out. If you've got the gift of mercy, you will be able to identify what that need is and act accordingly. And the rest of us need you to help us to do that.